Howdy neighbor, how is your garden growing? Today in my garden, what we're going to be talking about is what you should be planting, what seeds you should be starting, what things you need to be getting out of the garden, harvesting, transplanting, ideas, and things to watch out for in the fall season. So whether you live in North Florida, Central Florida, or South Florida, this is gonna be the video for you. But before I jump into which vegetables should you start by seed and which flowers should you transplant into your garden, we need to first talk about some of the fundamental basics of what it means to be fall here in Florida. Because once we understand this, it's gonna make a lot more sense why we're gonna do the things that we're gonna do. So the first thing is, let's be clear about what fall is. You may be like me and you kind of feel like fall starts when the kids go back to school or football season starts or pumpkin spice lattes come out. But technically speaking, fall starts at the fall equinox, which is at the end of September, right around September 20th through the 23rd, depending on the year. It's literally when the sun is crossing the equator and the planet is tilting so that the northern hemisphere is further away and the southern hemisphere is closer. Officially speaking, this year, fall goes from September 22nd to December 1st. But for the sake of this video, I'm gonna basically talk about fall being October, November, and December. Now that we're on the same page of which months we're talking about, let's talk more about, because we're gonna be talking about October, November, and December, we're talking about kind of a big transition time period as we head out of the hot monsoon season of the summer and towards our cool drought season of the winter. So at the beginning of the season, we're really moving out of our hot temperatures where we're typically above the 90s for our highs, and we're now moving into highs that are in the 80s early in the season and can drop down into the 70s, especially if you are up in North Florida. When it comes to our lows, well, early in the season, we're gonna typically still see lows in the 70s, maybe in the 60s, depending on where you live in the state. And then later in the season, we're gonna head down into the 50s. Now that is a average for the season, not a day by day forecast. We're of course gonna have some days that could get hotter and sometimes they can get colder. It really depends on a lot of factors, from polar vortexes up north to hurricanes still coming through. When it comes to how much rainfall we're gonna get during this time of year, it's gonna swing pretty rapidly. So at the beginning of the season in October, we do get a couple of inches to 3 inches of rain. And then towards December, we're probably only gonna be about 1.5 inches of rain for an entire month. You're gonna hear me say this a lot, but it all depends, because of course at the beginning of the fall season we're still in hurricane season. Actually, the entirety of October and pretty much the entirety of November is still part of hurricane season. So all of this can go out the window if we're hit by a tropical depression, a tropical storm, or a hurricane, which can dump just absolutely tons of inches of rain onto our garden. And then of course, the third component to our recipe of how things are gonna work in the garden outside of temperature and rainfall is of course gonna be our sun. And the sun that we have in the fall is so dramatically different than what we had in the summertime. Summertime, we have UV indexes sitting up at the 10, 11, 12, and if you're in very, very South Florida, it could actually even hit 13. But once we hit fall, we're talking about peak UV indexes at the early end of the season being around 8, and then once we're in December, we're down to 5. That's amazing. We're almost out of sunscreen territory. Now, if you have a northern mindset, this next piece might really surprise you. And that's our fourth fundamental building block of how our gardens function. And that's gonna be, of course, wildlife. Typically, most people are wired to think about fall being the kind of everything starting to go to sleep or migrate away. But that's the thing here in Florida, it's kind of topsy-turvy. And instead of seeing less insects, less wildlife, we're actually gonna see an increase of wildlife in the fall season. The combination of the cold happening in the north, which is causing massive amounts of birds to migrate down to Florida or through Florida, butterflies migrating to Florida, hummingbirds migrating to Florida. We're also seeing that without the monsoon rain just smashing and deluging everything, is that we're gonna have more bugs in the fall season than we had in the summer season. And depending on what your priorities and goals are with your garden, this can either be a great thing or something that could be quite a bit of a challenge. So let's first start with our vegetables, and specifically let's talk about our hot weather crops. For those of you who went and gardened through the summertime, that's hard to do. First start with our hibiscus plants from the summer. That's cranberry hibiscus, roselles, and okras. So let's talk roselles first, because this is the time where we're now, I don't know about you, but I'm on that like ticking clock, like, are we done yet? Because I need to get you out, because that's what we're doing right now, right? We're finishing. If your hot weather crops are in the beds that you're gonna put cold weather crops like lettuces and warm weather crops like tomatoes in, we really got to think about like these guys got to get out of the way, because our primary crops, our classic crops, are going to be coming in. So with things like roselle, what we're going to be looking for is we're looking for buds to form, flowers, and then calyxes. What does that mean? Let me show you. So here is one of my roselle plants, and you can see it's got a stem and there are no flowers on it and there are no buds. I want you to look at that stem right there. Nothing is happening. And that is how this plant was just a week ago, but you can see if you look right here, is there are already buds on this plant. And we're looking for these guys because about a week after these appear, we are gonna get our hibiscus flower. And once we get our hibiscus flower and it opens and then drops, about 8 to 10 days later, we're gonna be harvesting the fruit, which is called the calyx, which is gonna form right here. And will start to look a little bit like this. This one's got probably about a week left on it before I harvest it. And this is the time of year where we're gonna make the choice, is we're either getting recipes so we can make some teas from our roselles, or we're gonna make a classic cranberry sauce alternative. Me, I'm a big fan of the cranberry sauce alternative, and this is the perfect timing because if you follow the timeline that I gave you guys in winter and spring and then got these in the ground in late spring, we should be in the time period of late September, early October, being ready to harvest these, create our cranberry sauce alternative jams so that we have them in time for Thanksgiving and Christmas. So this is very exciting, but that's what you're gonna wanna be looking for. So your timeline is you'll see no buds, and then just one day you're gonna walk out there and it's gonna be like buds. And then it's going to be about a week from bud to flower, and then one to 1.5 weeks, then you want to start harvesting your calyxes. Once they're in your fridge, you've got about a week to make your jam. Okras in my garden, I've already removed them. I've chopped and dropped them and added them to the ground. One of the things, if you haven't removed your okra plants yet, is to allow them to kind of get to their long woody state and then let them dry out and then harvest seeds. So that would be one of the early October tasks if you haven't already removed your okras. Last but not least, hiding amongst my roselles are my cranberry hibiscuses. Now these ones don't like the cold that they would see in the wintertime, but if you're in South Florida, that might not matter. For Central and North Florida, you'll want to be considering cutting these back to either make space for your classic vegetable crops, or you're going to be wanting just to get them out before they start dying when it gets a little bit colder, or chopping them back in general. If you have them in a place where they can stay all year, go ahead and leave them until late in the season and then consider chopping them back or letting them die back when we hit December and January. But for those who are like me and they're in the vegetable beds, right where you're gonna put some tomatoes, you'll wanna start considering cutting these out by early mid-October so that you can put your tomatoes in ground. Hard long beans like these Puerto Rican black beans, this one you're gonna wanna be removing very early in the fall season. I'm talking that late September, early October. A good thing you could do is chop and drop all this greenery and put it down on your beds if you have them, or put them on the ground to refresh some of the nitrogen back into the ground. You'll also wanna be looking for your pods that look like this, to start pulling these and shucking them. That's where you get the little beans out, and letting them dry before you store them, or go ahead and can them. If when you're taking them out, they're still green like this, but plump, you can go ahead and leave them to dry out for a few days. I usually typically leave them in my garage where it's just slightly less humid to dry out before I go ahead and start shucking them. When it comes to your sweet potatoes, it's gonna take 4 to 6 months before they're ready for harvest. So depending on when you put them in the ground will depend on about when you're gonna get them out. Now, because you went through the hot weather seasons, they'll tend to be closer to that 4 to 5 month range. So in order to go ahead and figure out when to harvest them, you're gonna wanna just kind of poke below the leaves and look for tops of sweet potatoes, and then just kind of dig around. And then you'll decide to either pull them all up or dump the buckets if you have them in kind of containers. And then you can go ahead and cure them just by putting them in your garage for 2 weeks. I typically just take a cardboard box, put them all in there, leave them in there for 2 weeks, and they're fine. Because the curing process, that's basically where the plant goes and consolidates the sugars to make it the sweet potato. Requires temperatures of 75 degrees and hotter. And most Florida garages, they're 75 degrees or hotter. So just get a cardboard box, toss your sweet potatoes in, don't worry about washing them or anything, and let them sit there for 2 weeks, then rinse them off and bring them inside. Another crop that may have gone through the summer for you and that you need to consider what are you gonna do with it is gonna be your peppers. If you have chosen one of the peppers that I recommend, like these banana peppers here, you have to make the choice. Are you going to keep them like a perennial plant and let them go almost all year round? Or are you going to take these out and remove them? Now, the thing is because and we'll get into the warm weather crops in a second, we're adding peppers back in at this time of year. So even though you have something that made it through the summertime, they'll actually grow all year round. Certain varieties like banana peppers, cubanelles, and others can actually grow for years and years in a Florida garden. But the thing is you got to make the choice. Is this bed staying for peppers or is it going to become something else? Mine are looking so good right now. I don't want to take them out, but I have plans for this bed. The other things you should do when it comes to your hot weather crops, besides just removing your vegetable crops from the beds, you also want to get rid of all the weeds. Plus, top off the beds with more soil and add some sort of fertilization back in. That can be through compost, chopping and dropping, shake and bake, what's it called? Shake and feed. You can add that back into, or whatever fertilizer of choice into your garden bed. Because if you've had garden beds or grow bags that have been used through the summer and the springtime, they need their nutrition refreshed. Not just because plants have been growing in them, but also because we've had those monsoon rains. The monsoon rains of Florida, combined with our sandy soil, allows for nutrients to really drain through really fast. So even if you put fresh soil in at the beginning of the summer and then grew nothing in them, they still need nutrition added back in just because stuff has been washing through all through the summer. So make sure you top off, add nutrition. And before we move to our warm weather crops, there's one other thing that you need to be doing when it comes to your hot weather crops, and that's marking down, whether it's in your phone, a notebook, the Wild Floridian Garden Planner, is to write down and document what worked, what didn't, and what would you do differently. We want to note things like which varieties are working, which things we would probably do in a different location, which things did we want to start earlier, later. Did we hear about a variety that we really liked and thought worked well, but we didn't get a chance to try this season? The more that you document what worked really well in your garden and what you're going to change for next season is what's going to take your garden from this level to the next level each year. Okay, let's talk warm weather crops. Now, if you've been following along with me all throughout the year, you know that I was recommending in late summer that you were getting your warm weather crops started. It's gonna be everything from tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, corn, beans, and squashes. So if we've cleared out our hot weather crops, or we've started totally new vegetable beds, this is gonna be the time of year. And you're gonna be trying to be shooting for that late September, early October if you're in North and Central Florida. And then it's a little bit later for South Florida just because you guys stay a lot hotter. You're usually about 4 weeks behind, so you're gonna be in that late October to early November time period for getting these in. And the main thing we're trying to do, especially in North Florida, is you're trying to finish these plants before you're gonna get potentially freezing temperatures when it comes to winter time, typically in January. It can happen in December, but mostly we get like those freezing frost type dates in January. So we want to make sure that these are in ground and they have a good 2-3 months so that they can make tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants. Now, some of you might be freaking out at this moment and going, wait a minute, I didn't start anything by seed. Am I behind? Does this mean I don't get to grow tomatoes this year? And the answer is no. No, it doesn't. You can always start things by seed. It just might not be the right time of year or the most likely to be successful time of year for that plant. I'm a big fan of experimenting. I'm a big fan of it trying. And if you really want to try seed starting something like your tomatoes or peppers or eggplants, go for it. Every year is a little bit different. Sometimes it's hotter, sometimes it's colder. Like last year, after the hurricanes hit, it was way cooler than it had been the prior 3 years. A couple years earlier, it was hotter than hot. But the other thing is even if you didn't seed start, you can just go buy plants. You can go to your Home Depot, you can go to your Lowe's, your Ace Hardware, you can go to your local nursery and just go buy plants. It's more expensive than seed starting, but if you have your heart set on growing your own fresh tomatoes, peppers, or eggplants, and you want to do it now and not wait for next year when we come back around to it, then just go get some plants. Okay, I realized there was something I missed with warm weather crops. Good thing I took notes and I checked my planner because it reminds me of the things I need to tell you. One, you might be wondering, hey, if I'm gonna go to the Home Depot, Lowe's, Ace Hardware, what kind of varieties, what kind of tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants should I look for? I mean, the long and short of it, when it comes to peppers, hands down, year after year, and the people who are in my membership, the people who are in this Wild Floridian community have shown that if you buy the store-bought banana peppers, yeah, I know, the ones that you're gonna pay $5-6 for, it's worth it. The banana pepper that is by, I think it's Burpee is the brand that comes in the cups. If you get one that's in like the, I'll call it the solo cup size, These things do great here. I'm all about being really smart with your money. And if you were gonna spend $6 on a plant and feel really confident that you're gonna get lots and lots of peppers off of it, I'm gonna tell you the banana pepper. Cubanelle peppers that you can buy from the store are pretty good. Things like jalapenos at this time of year, solid choice. People have gotten good results with the bell peppers. I find it to be hit or miss, so that's kind of one of those, I won't guarantee you're gonna get stuff. I don't feel confident, but like it's worth a try. When it comes to tomato plants, any of the smaller, pretty much all the smaller type tomatoes have worked well in the past for me, whether it's their grape tomatoes, cherry tomatoes, yellow pear tomatoes, sugar sweet baby, sugar baby. There's like a bunch of ones that are like sugar baby, sweet baby. They have those. All those have worked well. Usually when it's been the bigger tomatoes, that's where it gets really hit or miss when I go to the Home Depot and Lowe's, whether they perform in the garden. When I've gone to local nurseries, if it's a Cherokee type tomato, those have worked great for me. And in general, you could try things like beefsteak and big boys at this time of year because it is the right time of year for those bigger tomatoes. The one tricky thing about buying transplants at this time of year is not all the nurseries are on the Florida timeline because they're governed by like national organizations. Now, some of the purchasing managers at the big box stores like Home Depot and Lowe's have gotten very wise to this and are now ordering stuff at the right time of year. So I know some people are seeing good purchases at their stores, but it's hit or miss. I know some of y'all were like, which Lowe's do you go to for flowers and vegetables in St. Petersburg? Because the one it seems you go to looks great, but the one in St. Petersburg that I go to, and yes, even in the same city, one can be great and one can just be like, corn. Corn is on the way to my next tip, but it's not my next tip. The next tip is actually, it's down here. It's flowers. I know we're talking about warm weather crops, but let me remind you, if you're growing tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants, squashes, and beans, you can increase your harvest with flowers, but specifically pollinator plants. Because what's gonna be happening during the fall season, you're gonna transplant in like your October time period. You're gonna potentially direct sow things like your beans and squashes right into the ground in like the late September, early October time period. But when we get into later October and early November, you need plants that are gonna bring the bees in because they will take your harvest levels up, 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 up. And if you were gonna do just a couple of plants, here are gonna be the few that I would consider. If you need to just go to the store and buy something at like a Home Depot and Lowe's, I'm picking up a salvia. Salvia's hands down, look when you're at the store. Bees, covered in bees. And it's the right time of year for salvias in our garden. So grab that blue salvia, that blue purple salvia that you see there. Sometimes they have a red salvia, and get that in a pot, in a bigger pot, near your tomatoes, your peppers, and your eggplants, your squashes, beans, and increase your harvest level. If you're going for a native plant, they've all closed up for the day. Dang it. A couple hours ago, there was like so many. Here, you can see them. But these are tropical stages. Tropical stages, which is native to Florida. I mean, it blooms pretty much almost all year round. And having a pot of this or a bed of this near your tomatoes, your peppers, and your eggplants will be really, really helpful to increase your harvest. The only tricky thing about these is they can seed a lot and they can be growing everywhere. They're not hard to pull, but they can seed a lot. Now, some of y'all are like, Jacqueline, I'm not a flower person, I'm a vegetable person. I don't want to be adding flowers every single year, and that's cool. I get that. I mean, I'm not like that, but you're like that, so let me help you. If I were gonna try to just add one plant once to help me with these that are low maintenance plants that work in most people's yards, my two recommendations would be, number one, firebush. Everyone in the native community pretty much loves this plant. It's a large shrub. They have dwarf varieties now. It blooms almost the entire year in my garden. Outside maybe late December through January. North Florida, it will die back, so I have some other recommendations. But Central South Florida, like this is the one. And it's really versatile. I see people do it as like a property, like a hedge up against their house. I have neighbors who literally have it as a privacy hedge that's like 10, 12 feet tall between 2 yards. I had a neighbor who shaped it like a tree because they can be shaped like small trees that only get about 12 feet tall. Or you can kind of leave it as kind of a bushier shrub that gives it a kind of a little bit more wild tropical look like I have here. You have a lot of options with this plant, but it blooms a lot. The bees love it, the birds love it, the butterflies love it. It's great. And so if you just add one of these near your vegetable garden, because yes, we are near my vegetable garden, this can be one of the plants that you add. The other one is this plant right here. This right here is gray leaf tea bush. It is actually one of our edible natives because yes, it's called a gray leaf tea bush because the leaves are kind of more of the silvery tone, and yes, you can make a tea from the leaves, which is a real win. But what's really cool about this plant is almost the entirety of the year, you have these small purple flowers on it that the bees, like, they love. Everyone who has a gray leaf tea bush just love. And what I think is cool about this, besides that it's cool tone versus the tropical sage's warm tone, that one very much gives you tropical vibes. If you want tropical vibes, I would go firebush. If you want more of this cottage, English cottage garden vibes, gray leaf tea bush. Or just add both of them near your garden. You put them within like 10 to 15 feet of your vegetable garden, you're gonna get bees. Like, there's literally bees on it right now. Now let's also talk squashes, because some of you are gonna start things like pumpkin plants, maybe Seminole pumpkins. Maybe you're gonna go be adventurous with things like zucchinis and stuff like that. When it comes to your vining, running pumpkins, just remember that they always put out a lot of male flowers before they put out the female flower. The female flower is where you're gonna get the fruit. So don't get discouraged that you don't see any pumpkins on the vine if you haven't seen any female flowers. And usually, yeah, they put out 5, 10, 15, sometimes some plants even 20 male flowers before they even do one female flower. And beans, I don't know what to say about beans. Stick them in the ground and they grow. So the things to be thinking about, especially if you skipped over my hot weather section because you were like, hey Jacqueline, I took a break over the summer and I didn't do anything. Then let me remind you of some of the things that you need to do to get your beds, grow bags, giant pots ready. 1, you need to fill them with soil if they're not full yet. 2, you need to top them off with soil if you already have soil in them, because it's not unusual over the summertime for the soil to drop due to all the rain we get. The third thing is you will want to amend the soil. You want to add some fertilizer, whether it's going to be compost that you made or you buy. You're going to add maybe some fertilizer, some shake and feed to the area, or whatever brand of your choice. Those are going to be things you're doing. Plus you're removing any weeds or dead plants from the plant, from your growing areas. Then once you do that and you transplant to the area, you're going to want to make sure that you are monitoring watering at this time of year, because this time of year it's like the rain is not coming like we had in the summertime. And once you put them in the ground, you're going to really want to stay on top of your watering every day, every other day. You want to go from watering every day when you primarily first transplant it for a couple days, then move to every other day, then to twice a week. And then this is where if you shut off your irrigation over the summer, and things like our roselle plants and all that stuff like can handle it, now we need to be turning our irrigation back on. So whether you're using your landscaping sprinklers or you have drip irrigation in your bed, or it's just you going out there with a hose or a watering can, this is now the time of year like we got to stay on top of it, because we are definitely in drought season. The other thing to watch for at this time of year, especially with our nightshade plants, and nightshade plants are going to be tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants, is going to be our tomato hornworms and our tobacco hornworms, which are, at the end of the day, hawk moths. And at this time of year, moth populations are pretty high. So some of the tips that I would have for you guys during this time of year, especially during October and November, especially during October when you're moving these out into the garden, is to consider doing things like bug netting, making sure you don't have any nighttime lights pointing at them, because that brings the moths towards them. And just checking your baby plants regularly until they get about this size. Once they get pretty well established, over a foot to 18 inches, I don't really worry about looking at them for any types of caterpillars, because just like my butterfly plants, they can handle a chomp or two. We really just don't want them to kill the plants when they're teeny tiny. Now, for those of you who want to be adventurous and figure out how to start your eggplants, peppers, and tomatoes so that they can be successful in your garden, I did make a seed starting video that takes you step by step. I mean, like, literally pull out your supplies and watch it as you do your own thing, because I'm going to take you through everything that you need to know. And for those who followed along and are now ready to move their baby plants to bigger plants, well, I also have the video that's all about up potting and what you basically do next to move them into these bigger containers. So you got those to watch. And fun fact, not just for warm weather crops, coming out soon, I'm going to have one for cold weather crops too. So if you want help with following along with lettuces, onions, carrots, and all that jazz, I'll show you how. Vegetables before we move into our cold weather vegetables, because that's the thing at this time of year is that, I mean, We're getting hot weather crops out, we're getting warm weather crops in, but we're also seed starting and transplanting cold weather crops. So let's talk about cold weather crops. Okay, let's talk cool weather crops. These are flowers, not cool weather crops, but whatever. It gives you something cute to look at. So when we're talking cool weather crops, we're talking about lettuce, beets, radishes, carrots, onions, green onions, scallions, potatoes, broccolis, cauliflower, cabbages, Brussels sprouts, kale, other stuff too. There's cold weather crops. There's such a long list. And this is the time of year. In North and Central Florida, you can start at the very beginning. So like your October time period, early October, you can go ahead and get your seeds starting. Especially you're gonna wanna get things like your broccolis, Nebraska. So broccoli, cauliflower, kale, Brussels sprouts, and cabbage. And if you're in South Florida, you'll wanna wait probably a little bit later in October. So kind of like late October, early November to get your seeds started. And the reason is we're trying, because these are the cold weather crops, but they're like, not as cold weather crop as like your beets and your radishes. Like your beets and radishes and carrots are like, oh yay, it's really cold. And your broccolis and cauliflowers, they're like, we like it cool, but not cold. So that's kind of the main difference. So North Florida, you're trying to get these going, get them started before we get like the freezing temperature. Though at the end of the day, with all of our quote unquote freezing temperatures, typically we can protect them through any frost freezing temperatures, unless it's like last year where like dumped inches of snow up in North Florida. That was a bit harder. But for a lot of Florida, I mean, we're talking about like where I live, if it hits freezing, it's like, oh, it's 2 hours. Miami, I don't even, like 1977 was the last time it snowed there. But for most of Florida, we're usually just trying to get through a day or two. We kind of run out there, we do some stuff, and it's fine. So we want to get them started. We want to kind of try to have the chance to finish them before those coldest of cold snaps. And yes, you could be doing seed starting. So let's talk some of the varieties that you could be seed starting. So let's talk first lettuces, because who doesn't love a lettuce? Who doesn't want to have a salad? And this is one of those kind of faster turnaround crops. So you want to pay a little bit more attention to when you start, because it only takes like 2-3 weeks and then you can start throwing them out in the garden. You could put them directly as seeds in the garden, but with the rain, in late September, early October, sometimes it gets a little too hard and it moves those little seeds around a little too much. So I like to seed start them in trays, but you can do it either way. I've done it both ways in the past. So lettuces, I am a big fan of butter crunch lettuce, just because it's a nice lettuce, and romaine type lettuces. So there's like a whole bunch of different types of romaines. I like outrageous. You guys are gonna hear that a lot. It's a red lettuce, so it's just like red lettuce with the green lettuce, just a nice combo. But there's a lot of options. And this is one of those ones that if you do see transplants, like little trays of plants over at Home Depot, Lowe's, Ace, or wherever, when you're in like late October, early November, depending on where you live, those ones you can buy and put them out. Those are one of those like good value. If they're romaine lettuce, butter crunch lettuce, oak leaf lettuce, or Simpson stopper. That's a native plant. You're gonna help me out. Someone's gonna help me with what I'm trying to think of. There's one other grouping of lettuces, but those you can go ahead and put in the garden. So those will be some of the options for those. Onions, remember we want to do short day onions here in Florida because we are heading into shorter days, right? Because we're heading towards winter, so the days are getting shorter, not long days, because it's backwards here in Florida, because up north they start them as they're heading towards spring and summer, but the days are getting longer, and we are heading them as the days get shorter. So you want a short day variety no matter what type you get. I tend to pick stuff that comes out of Texas, because Texas seems to be really good at coming up with varieties of onions, and southern Texas has a lot of similarities. The parts that especially they're near the Gulf are more similar to Florida, and so their stuff seems to work better for us. So things that are like Texas grano, this says Texas, pick Texas. Yellow onions, white onions, red onions. If it's from Texas, if they figured it out in Texas, I have higher confidence in those onion seeds. Then when it comes to things like beets, I just use Detroit Red. Broccolis, I'm all about Waltham, DeChico. There are other varieties that work. Cabbage, I've just grabbed the cabbages from the store, and those have worked great. So whatever that is, that seems to work great for me. And the other thing is that the things I start in trays are gonna be things, all the brassicas, so kale, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, cabbage, broccoli. I'm also gonna start things like lettuce in trays, and I would start onions. You can start onions in trays. I have done it in trays. I have also done it straight out in the beds. The things that you want to start in the beds are going to be carrots, onions, radishes, and beets, all your root kind of crops. But onions is that one that like you could do it either way and both work really well. I tend to do them right in the bed because I just kind of draw a big old line and okay. So if you haven't bought your seeds yet, you're buying your seeds for your cold weather crops. We talked about seed starting. I will have a video that's going to do the step-by-step for cold weather crop seed starting in tray, and I'll probably do a different one for in ground because the timing will be a little bit different for me because I got to get these guys out of the way. The other thing to know is that unlike your hot weather crops, which took 4 to 6 months, but more like 5-6 months to make a harvest, and your warm weather crops, which typically take about 3 to 4 months for harvesting, when it comes to our cold weather crops, these are tending to be the faster turnaround, specifically lettuce. I mean, like, you're at the point of 30 to 45 days, you can start harvesting lettuce from the time you start your seed. It's that fast. But also things like most of your cold weather crops, you can eat the leaves, even if the thing you're growing isn't for the leaves. So like you can eat carrot leaves, you can eat beet leaves, radish leaves, broccoli leaves, cauliflower leaves, cabbage leaves is the thing you eat. So that's a little different, but that's the thing, is that like you can start harvesting even if it's not for the main thing. So like you can start harvesting carrot greens even if the carrot's not ready, beet greens even though your beet's not ready. But a lot of them tend to be faster turnarounds, like at 45 days, 60 days, 80 days, or 90 days. They grow a lot faster, and that's just it. They just grow a lot faster. So you will be in kind of a quicker turnaround. So if you do start stuff in October by seed, you're looking at October, November, so mid-late to some November for some of the leafy green parts, and then you're looking at December, early January for some of the other parts, which puts you in a really good position before frost hits. And the other thing before we leave the vegetable section is we're going to talk about a vegetable that's not a vegetable, but everyone treats it like a vegetable, because it's strawberries. And the beginning of fall is the beginning of transplanting strawberries out into your garden. This is the time of year, especially in Central Florida, where all the strawberry growers that are going to sell you some of the plants, this is the beginning that you can start getting your strawberries going. The temperature, the sun has gotten less intense, the temperature has come down, and so you can get your strawberry starts. You can order them online, you can go pick them up from stores. If you were going to go to a Home Depot, Lowe's, the type they grow, sometimes they grow quinolts, sometimes they grow albions. Those are good. Those are good ones that you can grow. And if you're growing them at the right time of season, they can be very productive. I've had ones that I've bought from the store that are very productive. I've tried what was this super sweet one? That one didn't work very well for me from Home Depot, Lowe's. Ordering starts online can be really good. I do have a video somewhere in my catalog that does show you how to go get your strawberry starts started in ground. So check that out if you want more help with getting your strawberries started. And if you hadn't, and I guess it's a friendly reminder, if you didn't grow any of the hot weather crops and you said, I'm too late for warm weather crops, let me do remind you that if you are gonna just put cold weather crops in the area, you do need to get your containers or your beds or clear your area, fill them with soil or top them off, and then of course add fertilizer as we come out of the summer season because of washout. I explained it more in the other sections if you skipped ahead, and that's totally okay if you did. But that would be a tip, is that you do need to amend your soil at this time of year. So let's hit our next section, which is gonna be flowers. I'm really getting into flowers this year, so I'm gonna give you kind of the notes that I've taken so far of how I'm thinking about fall as it comes to flowers. So with the temperatures dropping and it's getting into our warm and cooler weather, here are some of the flowers that you could be adding to your garden, whether you're going with Florida native or Florida friendly. You should consider plants like mums as a Florida friendly in the October time period or November time period. Whether they're Florida friendly or native, asters are gonna come in big time at this time of year. They tend to be pale purples and they can come in all sorts of sizes. I've seen Florida friendly ones at the store. And of course, then there are a few different Florida native asters, with one of my favorites that usually comes into bloom in my garden in November, which is climbing aster, large bush. That thing gets purple flowers this big. And if you want to talk about attracting bees, whoo, that thing is covered in flowers, covered in bees. It's a great plant. The other things to think about are, we already talked about our tea bush up front, which will be flowering. Another Florida native that does really well is called salt and pepper, or it's also called sometimes snowy square stem. That, whether you get the tall type, which is native to North Central Florida, or the one that's native to South and Central Florida, which is the shorter one, which is the one I've typically had in my garden. That one also blooms really well in fall, winter, and then springtime period. and can be kind of, I like the low one. I think more of the native nurseries are carrying the low one, which is more kind of like a standard shrubby plant that you can kind of make a little border with them. And the bees love that. So any of the bees that haven't gone dormant during the year, that's like a great nectar source for them. And then other things like begonias and snapdragons and some of your classic cottage gardens flowers are going to be coming into your garden at this time of year too. The other thing you can do is, if you're not picking up a transplant from a native nursery, or you're not picking it up from like a Home Depot, Lowe's with your Florida friendly plants, is you could start seeds. I did a video showing you guys how to start some of the native seeds, and some of them have been very successful. And one of the places that you would get them, and actually the most reputable place, is going to be Florida Wildflower Cooperative, which just sells Florida native wildflower seeds and a couple of Florida friendlies, but 98% of them are Florida native. And if I were you, I would be picking up my favorite, which is starry rosinweed, which grows almost all year round. It's a terrible name, but it's a great plant. The other thing to think about adding to your garden this year that goes beyond just the flowers is to add berries for birds. Whether it's things like beauty berries or shiny coffee or marlberry, fire bushes. I have a whole video that takes you through berries for birds, because as we hit time period like November, December, and January, a lot of our songbirds are going to go from eating insects to thriving on to making their diet a lot of berries, and these native berries will be really important. So if you're looking for some ideas on native plants and learning a lot more about them, check out my video, Berries for Birds in the Wintertime. Let's talk lawn. You've gotten past summer and you're over it. You've pulled all the weeds and you're over dealing with your lawn, and maybe you want to, at this time of year, consider moving to a lawn alternative. And while I have given you guys recommendations for lawn alternatives, this is the season where the lawn alternative suggestions are going to start shifting. With the drought coming in, some of the plants that work through the summertime, they're not going to really work at this time of year. Things like even frog fruit can start to head out, especially in late winter time. But I was just taking out that Florida Wildflower Cooperative, and they do have a native clover that could be added at this time of year so that we could get flowers in our lawn in springtime. So if you're looking for a lawn alternative to start adding at this time of year, and what's cool is you can buy seed packets and they basically represent enough seeds for 10 square feet. I've gone and picked up a bunch. I'm gonna go test it in this garden so that I can start creating a mixture of things like water hyssop, frog fruit, and clover in the garden to help feed my bees and just, you know, cover the ground. And a couple other tips for you guys for the season, whether you're growing food or flowers, is do remember that we are heading into drought season. And so therefore, while we kept our sprinklers and our irrigation off during the summertime, as we head into this season, we need to start turning them back on. So do that. The other thing I really want to remind you of, because we're heading to fall and I haven't touched on it, but fall is when all the holidays are. And so one of the things I really recommend is that you take the time when you lay out your fall plan with all these ideas and tips and things that I've given you, is to also make sure, especially as we get closer to that holiday season, is that you're starting to prioritize what you need to do. I personally feel this every year, because not only do I have the major holidays that are happening, but I also have my son's birthday, my husband's birthday, my father-in-law's birthday, my dad's birthday, my mom's birthday, my birthday, my other son's birthday, and my mother-in-law's birthday, all mixed in between that. That's right. All of the family has their birthdays basically from mid-October to mid-December. It is a gamut of celebration and we love it, but it does mean it can really pull you away. It really pulls me away from the garden. So I have to be really smart about how I use my time in the garden. And this is why it's super important to start laying out a game plan so that you can get the food that you want, the flowers that you want, have bountiful harvests, and have the garden of your dreams. So if you're looking to build a plan, go ahead and grab the digital copy of this year's Wild Floridian Garden Planner and pre-order next year's garden planner. And if you're looking for more fall ideas and tips, go ahead and check out this video right here. Okay, I'll see you soon. Bye.